Hi, I'm Sam Steverlynck. I'm the curator of the exhibition Zijn, naam was Austerlitz. Austerlitz was his name. It's a group show uniting 25 artists whose work deals with some of the issues that are elaborated in the book Austerlitz, which is written by W.G. Sebald. It's a German post-war writer, a very influential writer actually, because he kind of created its own literary genre, kind of a literary collage, if you want, by combining facts, fiction, and all different kind of art historical references and sources. The book Austerlitz is the last book he wrote. He basically only wrote 4 novels before he died prematurely. And you could consider it as basically his magnum opus. It's his most important piece because it's kind of uniting all certain themes and obsessions and literary techniques that he's been using before in a very amazing way. It's a bit of a tricky to reduce the book to the plot. But the book does deal with a person who's called Austerlitz. And there's a nameless narrator who meets Jacques Austerlitz throughout various places and cities. The novel starts in Antwerp and then goes to London and Czech Republic, etc. And throughout the conversations, which mainly deal about art history, architecture, 19th century, etc., little by little, the narrator starts knowing more about the past life of Austerlitz. Basically, Austerlitz was one of the kids who grew up in Czech Republic, but was sent on the so-called Kindertransport, a kind of a train to save him from the horrors of the Holocaust, as he was a Jewish boy, actually. And so the novel is basically dealing with this kind of repressed trauma that's coming back all of a sudden, and the way the character is dealing with these issues from the past. The exhibition is mainly built with works from private collections, which come actually from Tlön Projects. It's an initiative of Petra Kuipers and Chris Westerbrugge. And they kind of developed a new model, which is very intriguing. Basically, they do take care of a number of private collections. So they take care of the storage. They also developed a kind of software database, archiving. And under the name of Ookbaar Office, they do invite external curators to make exhibitions with the works from this imaginary collection. It's an imaginary collection in the way that they do not possess the collection, actually. And so the collection can come and go. So the title of Tlön is kind of a reference to the American writer Borges. And it's a reference to a planet where objects disappeared at the moment somebody does not look at it. So it's a very beautiful metaphor for artworks being hidden in private collections when they're not being activated. So I'd selected works from these imaginary collections. And the works that are on view here, so of course they are kind of linked to some of the themes, literary techniques and themes of the book Austerlitz. And some of the themes that are addressed in this exhibition are the use of found footage, the relationship between micro and microhistory, the way how traumatism are repressed and do return, unreliability of memory. So these are all like themes that are addressed in this exhibition by the 25 selected artists. So this is the first work on the exhibition. It's a work by Jasper Rigol, who's a Belgian artist. And what he did actually, his practice is a lot based on found footage, which is something he shares with Sebald. Sebald, apart from his special literary style, he's also known for using pictures in his book. Sometimes it's pictures he took himself, but often it's kind of found footage, family albums, etc. Which, by the way, also refers to autobiographical elements. So when he was a kid, he went through a family album and all of a sudden he saw a picture of his father in a Nazi uniform. So of course he was super shocked, and when he asked his father what the picture was about, the father always said, "I don't remember." So it's this typical post-war German trauma of the war, which was something never talked about in a lot of German households. So just like Sebald, Jasper is using a lot of found footage, and this is a picture he found in an old antique shop in Ghent, and it's showing like a picture from the 30s of an entire big group of old students from a school.
Rufus Wilmot Griswold, an anthologist, editor, poet and critic. In his books he unveiled previously unknown details from the life of Edgar Allan Poe, a writer, poet.
And what he does, so as you can see, there's a camera that's every now and then zooming into making a close-up on the face of one of the boys, and the narrator is telling the life story of one of the boys. And in a way, every time one boy is associated with the next by means of the camera movement. And so that's something done by software, an algorithm that Jasper designed. So in a way, what Jasper is doing is similar to Sebald, but Sebald does it in a way, in a very organic, associative style, whereas in this piece by Jasper Riegel, it's more by use of computer technology, like an algorithm. The work behind me is a work by Peggy Booth. It's a German photographer, and she took a series of pictures in the African Museum in Tervuren in Brussels. It's a very famous, even notorious museum because it's like the museum was built by the architect Charles Giroux, who's also the architect of Le Petit Palais in Paris, Le Petit Palais in Paris. And it was basically built for King Leopold II, the highly contested king who did atrocities in Congo. And it was kind of built as a way to show the richness of his colony and to kind of legitimize his entire colonial enterprise. One of the reasons I selected this work is also because of this subtle colonial dimension, which the novel Austerlitz starts, a very famous scene in the central station in Antwerp, which is one of the most beautiful stations in the world, and which was also realized with money that Belgium made on the back of Congo. That's also one of the reasons that, because of this colonialism, which led to modernity and Belgium being 19th century the fifth richest country in the world. So Peggy Booth, she managed to grab this atmosphere of this museum before it's got redone now, actually, because of this highly problematic colonial approach. And she really manages to get this kind of stuffy, old school museum with dioramas, with handwritten notes, this typical atmosphere that's also often recurring in the books by Sebald. This is work by Agnès Geoffroy, a French artist, and for it she's used found footage of a very notorious event that happened in 1912. It was Franz Reichelt, it was a German French tailor slash inventor who was working on a new invention, which was basically a suit that you could use as a kind of a parachute. So he asked permission for the city of Paris to try it out from on top of the Eiffel Tower. And he kind of gathered a lot of camera crews, etc. Last minute, however, he decided not to use dummies, as he initially said, but he jumped himself with disastrous consequences. So it's a kind of almost like a 9/11 moment, a highly mediatized event of somebody just dropping dead in a very cruel way. And the nice thing what Agnès did, so she used this found footage, but she transferred it into a slideshow. So the fall, which would have normally taken maybe 30 seconds, she kind of extends it in time, which takes like 7 to 8 minutes. And it's also this typical kind of dark faits divers that are also often recurring in the books of Sebald. This is a work by Oriol Villanova. He's a Spanish artist who's living in Brussels. And funnily enough, he especially moved from Spain to Brussels because in Brussels is a very famous flea market. And the practice of Oriol is basically, it's all about postcards. So almost every day he goes to shops, flea markets, you name it, to keep on expanding his collection of postcards. It's something that Sebald was also doing, and that Walter Benjamin, as a cultural theorist, which is also a big influence on Sebald, was also doing actually. So basically the practice of Oriol consists of collecting postcards. He must have thousands of them, which he's kind of classifying in almost an encyclopedic way, according to his own filing system. He has more than 150 categories, and here he's presenting from every category a couple of postcards. So he selected for every category there's like one or two or several postcards, and some of them are also directly referring to the book. The most famous example, of course, would be Palais de Justice. It's a very famous building. It was built in the 19th century, and it was inaugurated by King Leopold II. Once again, the contested yet, architecturally speaking, very important Belgian king. And it was the biggest building in the 19th century, actually. It's huge and it's so big, there's always one part under construction. So there was even scaffolding doing works, but even the scaffolding got old, so they used new scaffolding for the scaffolding. Slightly ironic Belgian situation. Was such a big building that there's always one part being restored. And it's also recurring in the book Austerlitz. There's a passage in which the narrator is referring to kind of an urban legend that says that as the building is so big, there's even a part that was used illegally as a barber shop, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. This is a work by Chaim van Luit, a Dutch artist who's also obsessed by archaeology. So he's often walking around in forests looking for remnants of the Second World War, especially bunkers, but he also has a metal detector. So he's basically walking around and finding old coins, etc., which he's using in his practice. This work is actually is a very beautiful piece in which he's kind of using rings of pigeons. And of course, back in the days, pigeons, also especially during the war, were used as a way of transmitting information. So basically, the pigeons died, so you could say that the message never got across. So of course, this is kind of one of the themes in the exhibition is the impossibility of communication, which this piece is a nice example of, as the message did not get across. And also the way he's kind of putting these pigeon rings together, you can see like the shape is on purpose. It's kind of referring to the way that birds are flying.